Of course you know. Of course you know. Of course you know. Of course you know all of my niggas be grinding. Of course you know all of my niggas be shining. Of course you know I'm POTC your highness. Of course you know all of my niggas get money. Of course you know all of my niggas berserk. Of course you know all of my niggas got work. Of course you know play with my niggas get murked. Of course you know I put your face on the shirt. Of course you know that a young nigga get paid. They hate on cfresh, I'ma shine in they face. Of course you know I get no fuck what they say. Of course you know I got them shooter with K. Of course you know all of my niggas got work. Of course you know all of my niggas berserk. Of course you know all of my niggas gon' ride. Of course you know all of my niggas gon' murk. Of course you know these niggas acting like bitch. Of course you know these niggas out here they snitch. Of course you know that how you end up with stitch. Of course you know been freaking turn code defended. Of course you know I done seen this shit a lot. Of course you know I put the beam on your neck. Of course you know shooter come shoot up the spot. Of course you know my nigga running it high. Of course you know all of my niggas be grinding. Of course you know all of my niggas be shining. Of course you know I'm POTC your highness. Of course you know all of my niggas get money. Of course you know all of my niggas berserk. Of course you know all of my niggas got work. Of course you know play with my niggas get murked. Of course you know I put your face on the shirt. Of course you know I put your face on the shirt. Of course you know play with cfresh you get murked. Of course you get hit with the K it gon' hurt. Of course you don't wanna feel that in your shirt. Of course you nigga better play it cool. Wet you up like a swimming pool. Of course you know I act a fool. Of course you know I blatted too. Of course you know all of my niggas be grinding. Of course you know all of my niggas be shining. Of course you know all of my niggas get money. Of course you know my money running like sun. Of course you know I serve the work to the jack. Of course you know my pocket full of blue honey. Of course I got my track shoes on, running course for the money. Of course you know all of my niggas be grinding. Of course you know all of my niggas be shining. Of course you know I'm POTC your highness. Of course you know all of my niggas get money. Of course you know all of my niggas berserk. Of course you know all of my niggas got work. Of course you know play with my niggas get murked. Of course you know I put your face on the shirt. Of course.